SQL Server 2012 Administration and Programming, SQL Server Sample Databases, first, second, and third normal form. This is the description of the first normal form. Alternative description: eliminate duplicative columns from the same table. Also, a table must have a primary key. That is very important, because primary key is a unique row identifier or unique record identifier within a table. With a unique row identifier and unique column identifier, we can accurately and exactly identify a cell within a table. So that is the column and row actually gives the address of a cell, and the cell can contain a data such as number or a name. So let's just check it, how this is done. Let's take a look at the Human Resources Department table, and we see that it has a primary key, and the actual information is in the name column. Modified date is a database maintenance column. So here is the key and key column, and name is the non-key column. Actually, it is the key column also, but it's not the primary key, but a unique key. And here is a non-key column group name. And modified date is just row maintenance column, so we know when the row was modified last time. Let's look at constraints. Let's look at indexes. And we see that the department name unique, it has a unique index. So what we see here is a integer, actually small integer, small int. Small int is 2 bytes, surrogate primary key, and the natural key is name, and that has to be unique, and that's guaranteed by the unique index on department name. Let's open the table, how it looks. And we see that the department ID, the surrogate primary key, and name is the natural key, is defined correctly. On the other hand, we see some repeating groups if we look at the group name. That would give us an opportunity to define a new table, and in fact we would even know what's the name of a new table. The name of a new table would be group name, and we would just have to foreign key from replace the group name column here with group name ID, which would be a foreign key pointing to the group name table. Why would it be better to foreign key the group name? Assume this table has 100 million rows, when to repeat all this information requires space, and it makes the table slower. It is much faster to have an int foreign key column, because it takes only 4 bytes. Another advantage of the 3NF database design, for example, if we change executive general and administration with the ampersand sign, when we don't have to change at million places, we would have to just change in the group name table. This is how we can create a new table. Let's create it. So we can store all the information in this table. And to get the information, we would do a select, insert, group name, select, distinct, group name, from AdventureWorks 2012, human resources. So IntelliSense is helping us out. Department table. Let's just see if it's going to work. And it did work. Let's select from the new table, select star from group name, and this is the result. So here is the new table which we created, and this is the primary key in this table, and this is the natural key. We would have to place actually a unique index on it to protect the natural key, but by accident we don't put a duplicate group name into this table. And this is the modified date, which is a row maintenance column. So this is the surrogate primary key, this is the natural key, and we don't have non-key column in this table. And this is the modified date. It's a maintenance column. Of course, this is non-key column. We can protect this table, the natural key, with a unique index. Let's execute it, and it executed successfully. Let's proceed with the second normal form. The second normal form requires the data stored in a table with a composite primary key must not be dependent on only part of the tables of a primary key, and also the database must meet the first normal form. So let's see if we see a table, but we are not going to find an example for this violation, because the AdventureWorks database is almost 3NF database. If we look at the Human Resources Employee Department table, we see that the primary key is a composite primary key, and we see the 4 gold keys here, and it consists of a business entity ID, which is a foreign key to a business entity table, department ID, which is a foreign key up to a department table, shift ID, which is a foreign key also to the shift table, and the start date. So the actual non-key column in this table is end date, and end date for an employee depends on the entire composite primary key, and it does not depend on any subset of a composite primary key. For example, if the end date information would not be dependent on the shift ID, then this table would violate the second normal form. What is telling us when an employee can work for a department such as the assembly department and for the day shift, and this is the start date. Assume the employee is transferred to the evening shift. So we would close up this record with the end date and start a new record with a start date where the shift ID would be the evening shift ID. Let's check out the shift table, and it has day, evening, and night. Let's check out the actual employee department history table. So the primary key for this table is a composite primary key: business entity ID, department ID, shift ID, and start date. For example, we can see that for this employee, first it was working for this department and for the day shift, and this ended. So currently this person is working for department ID 2 and the same day shift, and this is the start date, and the end date is null. That means currently still working for this department, and this is the modified date. It's a row maintenance column. If we look at employee 250, started working at department ID 4, day shift, at this date and to this date, and the following day, after the end date, started to work for department 13, day shift also. This is the end date, and currently this employee is working for department 5, day shift, and this was the start date. The third normal form requires the data stored in a table be dependent only on the primary key and not on any other field in the table. And the database must meet all requirements of a second normal form. Remove columns that are not fully dependent upon the primary key. We see some alternate definitions. When we see the definition for fourth normal form and fifth normal form as well, we are not going to find too many examples of normal form violations in AdventureWorks database because it has a very good design. So what can we do is create some tables which would be in violation of the normal forms. One item in the production.product table which can be normalized is this is production.product. The color can be broken out into its own table and just have a foreign key reference in the product table. Let's run the following query, which is going to create a table not in the second normal form. It's using the select into command and execute it. And check out the table. The product photo table, as we can guess from the name itself, has a composite primary key, and we can see the composite primary key as product ID and product photo ID. And when we look at the color column, we can see that this column is dependent only on the product ID. It's not dependent on the composite primary key, which consists of the first two columns, product ID and product photo ID. We see some other problem with the color as well. The color should have its own table, so we can use foreign key reference here. But even if we use foreign key reference, we still would have the same problem, is that the color is only dependent on product ID. And we see the violation right here. Let's create a table which is not in a 3NF form and select from this table. So this is a new product table. We added the category to this table, and actually the category can be inferred from the product subcategory ID, because the product subcategory ID table has reference to the product subcategory, which has a foreign key to a product category. Let's check it out. From the product subcategory table, we can infer the category, and here it is. Here is the foreign key to the category table. In this instance, the category column would be dependent on a non-primary key column, which is the product subcategory ID. The properly defined 3NF structure is product subcategory, and product category. So it's a hierarchical relationship among the three tables. If we add the database reference, we will get rid of the red line from IntelliSense, which indicates where it's not finding that table. When we execute the command, so this is SQL execution, we see the result sorted, and we see the hierarchical information. For example, Sport 100 helmet black product belongs to the helmet subcategory and the accessories category. And this is the detailed information, its actual price. Let's do a cleanup. We create the tables we created for demonstration purposes. recapping, a 3NF database does not have repeating data. In a 3NF database, each table has a primary key, which can be a composite primary key. In a 3NF database, the non-key columns are properly related to the primary key of that table. The best way to learn how to create 3NF databases is to study existing 3NF databases, and such a database is AdventureWorks. This is the end of the unit.